We have protected the integrity of CUSMA. Canada is calling into question the future of CUSMA. It's not the United States of America, it's Canada.
In mid-August 2025, trade talks between the United States and Canada have reached a standstill. The gap isn't just about tariffs on steel, aluminum, or autos. The bigger focus, the one casting a long shadow over both capitals, is the future of the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. This agreement shields roughly 85% of cross-border trade between the US and Canada from tariffs, keeping supply chains in North America largely integrated. But now it's under strain. US Ambassador Pete Hoekstra has publicly accused Canada of undermining USMCA by responding to Trump's tariffs with retaliatory measures. In Ottawa, leaders see it differently, as a necessary defense in a trade war Washington started.
You had the sense that he was recounting an alternative history in terms of the notion that Canada had somehow attacked the United States, when in fact, of course, we know that the tariff war that was launched by President Trump hit Canada first and hit Canada hardest of all of the U.S. trade partners.
The stakes go beyond political sparring. If USMCA is altered or dismantled, it could reshape not just the US-Canada relationship, but the economic stability of all North America. Trump's strategy has been to keep constant pressure on Ottawa. Since August 1st, Canadian goods outside USMCA rules face a 35% tariff, up from 25%, with metals like aluminum still taxed at 50%. Washington insists these moves are leverage, not punishment. Canada, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, is holding firm. The government refuses to sign what it calls a bad deal, even if that means waiting until the official USMCA review in 2026. Behind the scenes, Ottawa is strengthening ties with Mexico, seeking coordinated positions in case Washington tries to reopen negotiations early. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has warned that Trump might do just that, possibly before the end of 2025. The U.S. also faces its own risks. If USMCA collapses, American industries that depend on Canadian energy, auto parts, and minerals would see costs spike. That's why Canadian officials believe patience is their strongest weapon, using time to diversify export markets while keeping USMCA's protections in place. While high-level negotiators trade statements, the effects of tariffs are filtering into American households.
Aluminum goods from Canada are subject to a 35% tariff, which could mean higher costs for certain drinks and canned goods.
They don't understand that tariffs are paid by the consumer, okay?
In Seminole County, Florida, shoppers are finding sharp price increases at the grocery store. Parmesan cheese that sold for $12.99 is now $16.99. Coffee, sugar, and meat from Brazil, now under a 50% U.S. tariff, are climbing in price. Even champagne is up by a couple of dollars. Aluminum products from Canada, taxed at 35%, add to the cost of canned goods and beverages. According to a recent poll, 53% of Americans now say grocery costs are a major source of stress. The U.S. Census Bureau reports that imports are declining as companies buy less under higher tariffs, which in turn makes foreign-produced goods even more expensive. For many, these aren't abstract trade policy outcomes. They're changes felt directly at the checkout counter, forcing consumers to rethink daily choices. One Florida resident told local reporters he may start eating out more because cooking at home has simply become too costly.
They're clearly not trying to come to a fair deal. We know that they see tariffs as like a revenue stream, a way to tip the scales in favor of the U.S.
Trump views tariffs as a negotiating tool, designed to pressure trading partners into making concessions. But the longer the standoff lasts, the more the costs land squarely on American consumers and businesses. That reality could carry political consequences, especially if prices keep rising into the fall. Canada, meanwhile, is playing a longer game. By holding firm, maintaining alliances, and keeping USMCA protections intact, Ottawa aims to avoid rushed concessions while showing it can weather the storm. This isn't just about one agreement. It's about setting the terms for how North America trades for the next decade. The question is no longer whether tariffs hurt both sides. They do. The real question is who can endure the pressure longer? For now, the US-Canada standoff over USMCA remains a contest of resolve. And it's American voters who may decide when enough is enough.
I'm praying that everything's going to go fine. But if it doesn't, I'm going to ask the people, do you trust President Trump? I don't.
When the 35% tariff hit Canadian goods outside the USMCA, it wasn't tied to a breakdown in trade talks. There was no last-minute provocation, no missed agreement. The deadline set by President Trump simply passed, and the penalty was enforced. From softwood lumber to steel, the pain hit fast and deep. But the bigger problem wasn't just the tariffs themselves. It was the instability they represented. In recent weeks, the US president raised tariffs on dozens of countries, though in several notable cases, the tariffs were imposed for reasons that went far beyond trade. India was targeted for buying Russian oil, while Canada was placed in the same political category as China, a country that refused to bend the knee to the US and dared to hit back. And that's what turned this into more than a trade dispute. It became a question of how Canada should respond to a neighbor whose rules change without notice and whose goals shift by the day.
Carney has two big meetings today, cabinet and with the premiers. What is he saying to both groups?
I think he's giving them an update and telling them the state of play. I mean, the Prime Minister has been very good at keeping, his own government informed on stuff. He needs to have that political support around him. He'll hear the views and take the temperature on that.
Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't wait. Within days, he convened a virtual summit with provincial premiers and cabinet members. The goal wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. The meeting came after Trump's deadline had passed. Carney updated leaders on the stalled U.S. talks while gauging support across a divided political landscape. Ontario Premier Doug Ford called for a tariff-for-tariff response. Others, like Alberta's Danielle Smith, showed more caution. But Carney chose not to engage directly with Trump at this stage. That silence wasn't weakness, it was calculation. The message was clear. Canada would not be baited into an emotional reaction. Not yet. Earlier in the year, Canada responded forcefully. It imposed retaliatory tariffs and unveiled billion-dollar support packages, like the $1.2 billion Canadian dollar plan for the softwood lumber sector announced in early August. Steel producers received similar backing in July. But now, the tone is shifting. Carney's top ministers, including Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, are signaling a move toward flexibility. Speaking from Mexico City, where they met with President Claudia Sheinbaum, Champagne emphasized that Canada would reassess its trade response if it served the national interest. That doesn't mean Canada is backing down. It means Canada is choosing its moments. After all, 85% of Canadian exports to the US remain tariff-free under USMCA. The government is playing a long game, protecting vital sectors while keeping the door open for meaningful talks.
I think we're going to see some real progress today, though, Faiza, on that list of those nation-building projects. He really wants to get going on those quickly. He says the federal government is going to be up to speed to start approving those within 2 years, starting in September, when that office is.
Carney has refused to commit to any artificial deadlines. While Trump accelerates pressure with time-bound ultimatums, Carney is working through long-term plans, boosting domestic infrastructure, building a market for Canadian lumber within Canada, and expanding ties with Mexico. The Canadian government is launching a new federal office by early September to fast-track major nation-building projects, railways, power lines, and port expansions. These are not press releases. They are structural shifts meant to reduce reliance on U.S. access and create resilience, especially if future shocks occur. At the same time, coordination with Mexico is becoming more strategic. Both countries were blindsided by Trump's moves. Now they're finding shared cause: energy security, critical minerals, and joint resilience.
Looking at the Amcan Fortress, put a ring around America and the U.S., in Canada, have the two strongest nations in the world. We could thrive and prosper. He'd rather fight. I don't want to fight. I want to fight with our closest allies and friends.
Trump's trade strategy is unpredictable, volatile, and even. But that unpredictability may be Canada's greatest reason not to rush into a bad deal. Carney's approach isn't static, it's calibrated. Yes, some retaliatory tariffs may be rolled back. Yes, some sectors may be shielded more than others. But none of it signals surrender. It signals discipline. In a negotiation with no rules, Canada is choosing strategy over spectacle. The goal isn't to win headlines, it's to preserve long-term economic security. And in this kind of trade war, that might be the smartest move of all.
Knee, do not bend the knee. And we have a lot to fight for because we have a lot to offer. We're not some junior partner in this relationship that doesn't have a lot to offer.
Look, Canada's strong. We can give ourselves far more than anyone can take away.
At a time when many expected Canada to lash out or fold under pressure, the country is doing something else entirely. It's not reacting emotionally. It's rebuilding deliberately. Just days after President Trump imposed a 35% tariff on Canadian goods not covered by USMCA, Prime Minister Mark Carney made it clear. There would be no tit-for-tat escalation, no short-term theatrics. Instead, Canada is focusing inward, realigning its economy, strengthening domestic supply chains, and preparing for a future less dependent on the United States. This isn't just rhetoric. From Vancouver to Ottawa, the Carney government is channeling public frustration into long-term investment, rebuilding infrastructure, expanding value-added sectors, and exploring new trade corridors. It's not a loud response, but it's a determined one.
This is about building up bilateral trade relations between Canada and Mexico at a time when they're facing some pretty significant turbulence from here in Washington. The Trump administration has been talking about striking trade deals with all of its trade partners.
While Canada looks inward, it's also looking south. This week, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne and Foreign Minister Anita Anand are traveling to Mexico City for high-level talks with President Claudia Sheinbaum. The goal is simple: deepen bilateral cooperation. But the timing says more. Both Canada and Mexico missed Trump's August 1st deadline for new bilateral trade deals. Mexico received a 90-day reprieve. Canada did not. That difference is telling, but it hasn't derailed Canada's broader strategy. Mexico and Canada now find themselves on parallel tracks, each navigating the same unpredictable U.S. administration. In 2024, tensions flared when some Canadian leaders proposed cutting Mexico out of USMCA to seek a better deal with the U.S. That move frustrated Mexico, but today, both countries are facing a common challenge. And they're responding not with resentment, but with coordination. What's unfolding in Mexico City this week isn't just about trade. It's about repairing a key relationship and quietly shifting the balance of North American diplomacy. And all of this fits into a broader strategy from Carney, one that avoids reacting to volatility with more volatility. Instead of playing Trump's game of pressure and deadlines, Carney's response has been deeply structural. His approach is rooted in long-term positioning. Rather than seeking temporary tariff relief or concessions, Canada is investing in internal capacity through infrastructure projects, value chain localization, and trade diversification. Carney's message has been consistent. Canada cannot build a resilient economy if it relies on the whims of another country's politics. That message resonates far beyond economics. It speaks to sovereignty, stability, and national direction.
And there is no way that Canada should step down and say, okay, we're willing to take a second-rate deal for the next 3.5 years. That would be unfair to Canadians. That would be unfair to our economy.
This position is not just held at the top. On the ground, local leaders in Canada's most affected regions are echoing the same sentiment. In Windsor, Ontario, home to Canada's auto manufacturing hub, Mayor Drew Dilkens has spoken out against accepting a second-rate deal just to placate Washington. The economic cost is real. In recent weeks, major manufacturers like Stellantis have reported billion-dollar losses, and the added uncertainty from fluctuating tariffs is stalling investment. But the pushback from industry and government hasn't been desperation. It's been resolve. Canada remains at the negotiating table. But it's no longer negotiating from a place of urgency. It's negotiating from a place of strategy. So while Trump tightens the grip, Carney is building bridges, carefully, patiently, and beyond the usual channels. The partnership with Mexico is just one lane in a broader network Canada is rebuilding. It's a move not of isolation, but of insulation, guarding the country against external shocks and asserting its position as an equal in any negotiation. This isn't about Canada resisting for resistance's sake. It's about crafting a different kind of leadership, one that doesn't depend on appeasing the loudest voice, but on making the smartest long-term moves. And in that sense, the real story isn't just about tariffs. It's about who gets to define the rules in the next era of North American trade.